All right, folks, it is January of 2025. We are here in the studio at Summit 7 headquarters. Always a cool place to record. Joined by Mr. Daniel Akridge himself, everybody.
Hello, everybody.
And Daniel, we've got some somewhat breaking news. We've talked about whether other agencies will adopt CMMC and what that might look like as far as looking for proof that their contractors are implementing NIST requirements to protect controlled and classified information. And well, here we are. The GSA just released CIO-IT Security-21-12 Revision 1. Revision 1, known otherwise as IT Security Procedural Guide for Protecting Controlled and Classified Information in Non-Federal Systems and Organizational Process. That is that doesn't really roll off the tongue like CMMC does. But anyways, this is their method for verifying that GSA contractors and vendors, as they call them, have implemented the requirements in NIST SP 800-171 Revision 3, NIST SP 800-172 Revision 3, and that's what we're going to talk about today. All righty. So we'll put the link down below. If you guys haven't seen or heard about this, you probably have not seen or heard about this because there is no rulemaking associated with this. There are no articles associated with this. There are no interviews associated with this. I can't even find the people who signed the thing from GSA on LinkedIn. Can't find blogs, interviews, stories, nothing about the fact that they released a 45-page long document for how in detail they're going to go through the various phases, sub-phases, procedures, POAMs, external assessments, showstopper requirements, ODPs, blah, 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 all the stuff. And no one has talked about it. If you're a defense contractor and not a GSA contractor, this is still worth your time because there are lots of examples in this document about what GSA thinks a SSP entry might look like for a fully satisfied control or for a partially satisfied control. We never get examples out of the DoD. We definitely never get examples from NIST. So this is a useful thing to at least skim for examples. It's also valuable if you're a defense contractor for you to realize how much more straightforward CMMC is than whatever the heck this thing is that the GSA has come up with. Because as the GSA says in the document, the GSA process is very closely aligned with the NIST risk management framework process. And if you've never read Special Publication 837, boy, are you in for a treat. And if you don't want to read the whole thing, you can read this 45-page document, which is identical to the steps of the risk management framework process. The 5 phases of CIO-IT Security-21-112R1 are prepare, document, assess, authorize, monitor, duck, dive, dip, dodge, and duck, right? There are lots of subphases and lots of details in the document under each one of those. I think we'll probably just scroll through and look at all the highlights. But again, as I said, this is a great example of what it looks like for an agency to say, this is what we think right looks like. Specifically, table 2-7, if you're following along at home. Daniel, what are your thoughts here?
So my initial thoughts are a couple of interesting things. They almost took a CMMC 3.0 approach to it because Rev 3 is in the cards.
Mm-hmm.
I have not, and Jacob, this is the crazy part. We've talked to hundreds of thousands of companies that do defense work, also are active in GS. You happen to basically stumble upon this because someone just blind messaged you.
Somebody sent me a DM on LinkedIn. They were like, hey, this looks a lot like CMMC. And I was like, what is this? And it had been signed and issued and it's in effect. And I'm like, well, this is actually RMF.
Well, yeah. And it's a potential requirement of authorization of contract award based on the CISO on the GSA side. Like assessments are different with the different auditing bodies and C3PAOs. Like there are so many CMMC adjacent things, but also potential things that we could see in the newer version of CMMC with the Rev 3 adoption. So it's interesting how they basically tried to take the parts of CMMC that they liked, the parts of RMF that they liked,
yeah,
and then just kind of made their own thing. without rulemaking.
Yeah.
That's the shocker to me.
Yeah.
No one knew this thing was out there.
It seems it's crazy to me, but hey, we live in wild times. I think that, one of the big takeaways here is this goes to show, as we have stressed many, many times, CMMC is not the requirements. CMMC is DoD's method for verifying that you have implemented the requirements in NIST SP 800-171. So GSA could use CMMC, or they could use CIO-IT Security-21-112R1, because you have the requirements imposed on you. This is their program for verifying the implementation. So, just sort of scrolling through, the first thing that you're going to notice as you scroll through this document is just the raw amount of deliverables that you have even before the assessment starts. They want things like FIPS 199 security categorization templates filled out. They want Federal Risk and Authorization Management FedRAMP versus 800-171 qualifying comparison templates filled out. They want project work breakdown structured WBS submissions. They want all these things reviewed. There is a lot more stuff that needs to be done than what you might find when you look through the CMMC CAP, the CMMC Assessment Process Guide. They want engagement kickoff meetings. Honestly, this reminds me a lot more of the DIBCAC process for running assessments, where they want a bunch of paperwork up front. They want coordination meetings. They're going to have tight schedules. They want some very specific information. You and I have talked about this on episodes in the past, rather than a CMMC style approach where you call up a C3 PAO, you do some pre-vetting through phase one, and then you're kind of off to the races at that point.
I think the hard part for me wrestling with, I've never heard of the equivalent of.
Yeah.
I don't know what they do, experience what their bandwidth is, because assuming that the DoD has upwards of 300,000 that they estimate, GSA probably has how many? I've seen you guys are like,
man, I have no, less than that, but I mean, it's still going to be lots of companies. I mean, you're talking tens of thousands.
Yeah, I mean, what team do they have to validate?
Good question.
Validating it on top of you getting an independent assessment.
Yeah, so
just get an independent assessment.
Right. So that's the real big difference here, is that with CMMC, they have created a program where, because you're going through their assessment ecosystem, and they've sort of pre-tailored everything beforehand, if you get a passing score for your CMMC assessment, you're good.
Right.
The decision is green lighted because you've made it through this process. It's also part of the reason why this might be the reason why it didn't have to go through rulemaking, is that with the GSA process, you're going to submit everything, including the output of the assessment, and you're going to give it to GSA, and they're going to make a decision on a case-by-case basis about whether it's sufficient, which is how RMF works. But when you have to do it for tens of thousands of companies, you can't do that. It doesn't scale. So I'm not sure how they plan on doing it. One of the interesting things here is that they have a list of what they call their critical security capabilities. So they call out, hey, these are the ones that we care about, a lot, which is much easier to follow than DoD's point system of 5 points, 3 points, 1 points. They call them critical security capabilities. So they list out the requirements under access control, MFA, configuration management, the greatest hits that you would come to expect. But they tell you what they want to see for those critical capabilities because they think they're critical, rather than just being, this is a 5-point control, don't mess it up, next. So there's a little bit more information when it comes to that perspective from the agency, which is nice. But you have this big question mark at the end where it's like, okay, we go through the assessment. It isn't a question of pass, fail, or POAM. You just don't know what they're going to get. So that sort of brings us to the idea of assessments. So under 2.3.1 assessor selection, they are not using CMMC assessors. They don't mention CMMC in this document. They don't mention reciprocity with CMMC in this document. They say that the key to effective assessments is having assessors with the required skills, abilities, and technical knowledge to develop assessment plans, perform assessment testing, and prepare assessment reports. I agree. They go on to say the assessment must be independent and completed by either a FedRAMP accredited 3PAO or by an assessment organization approved by the GSA Office of the CISO prior to selection. They don't list a group of assessing options that have been approved by the Office of the CISO, and I haven't heard any FedRAMP 3 PAO really talking about this process. My first takeaway from there is it sounds expensive because FedRAMP 3 PAOs are probably more expensive than a CMMC C3 PAO. They're not, FedRAMP 3 PAOs sometimes have CMMC practices, but not always. Are the FedRAMP 3 PAOs ready to assess?
And F3 is 171. I mean, it's a subset of 53, but also they have to build. What's so confusing? We have a lot of 3 PAO friends, and no one has ever mentioned this at all.
Yeah.
You would think this would be all over LinkedIn. They'd be like, new service offering. We'll now assess you the GSA requirements of Rev 3. Like, you have to go through, train your team.
Yeah.
Specifically for something like this. A quick adoption or adaptation, but still.
Well, here's a good question is, the GSA doesn't mention CMMC because maybe CMMC is on Rev 2 and they're on Rev 3. Will the DoD moving to Rev 3 on CMMC 3.0, if you will, establish reciprocity? Like, if you've gone through this process, do you get recognized by DoD? Maybe they don't give you CMMC status, but they're willing to accept it, and you've got the hookup with the 3 PAO or I don't know, like whatever the process is. It'll be interesting to see how that gets navigated, because now we're in the situation where we haven't found any of those companies, but I'm sure they exist. You've got one customer saying you need Rev 3 in this huge process, and you've got another customer saying you've got Rev 2 and this other process. It seems odd to me that they did this because we're still waiting on the FAR CUI final rule. GSA is on the FAR Council with the DoD. I would hope so. Like, I don't really know. Something else to think in here too. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to go through. We won't go through all 45 pages. There are annual deliverables with this process. Under CMMC, you have annual affirmations where you're attesting that or affirming, or whatever the verb is, that you are keeping up with all the things that you implemented via your assessment that you actually do every 3 years. Here you have the assessment every 3 years, but under annual deliverables, the following deliverables will be provided to the GSA, ISO, ISM, and or contract officer's representative on an annual basis, or when there is a major change in the system, which isn't defined, the updated SSP, the updated impact assessment, and a penetration test every year.
So one other thing that we talked about a few days ago was response piece as well. Even if you think you have an incident, they want you to report. Wasn't that right? It's not even after you
suspected incidents.
Suspected.
Yep.
And it's an hour?
Within 1 hour.
Within 1 hour.
Typically what's happened in past rulemaking is every time there's a law or a regulation that wants to tighten the screws on incident reporting, almost always the initial language says suspected or confirmed incidents must be reported in X number of hours. And industry always pushes back and they go, you want me to report every suspected incident rather than a confirmed incident? That doesn't make any sense. They always take it out. This didn't go through rulemaking. It didn't go through the comment process. And so they've got suspected incident within an hour. That would get eviscerated in the comment process for good reason. Like, even DoD has had the language. It's like, you got to report within 72 hours, but it is known, confirmed, actual incidents, not anything that you suspect would be an incident.
So you have annual deliverables. You have to go through an independent assessment. All of those deliverables have to be obviously given to the CISO's office.
Then you got to go through the authorize step.
You have to report suspected incidents within an hour. I don't know if GSA is going to get a lot of CUI related participants in the. Yeah,
I mean, but that's also, like you said, I mean, no one's talking about it, and it's like, whether they like it, dislike it, what's good, what's bad. Anyways, one of the last thoughts here that people might find interesting in the document is Appendix C. They always bury the good stuff in the appendices. Appendix C is what they call showstopper security requirements for the non-federal security approval process. So these are the requirements that they would consider to be showstoppers, right? If you don't have these implemented, then they're not going to get through the authorized step. These would be the 5-point equivalent controls, if you will, and they list them all out by the requirement number and the description of the control. So there's probably about 8 of them in here. So definitely check those out. It's an analysis that I think we probably do in the future of like the overlap between GSA thinks that these are important, but DoD thinks that these are important. We're talking about the same baseline. We're talking about the same baseline for the same category of data. And now we've got 2 agencies who literally work together on the FAR CUI rule, and they think that different requirements are different criticalities. They're reporting. I mean, this is exactly why you wanted the FAR CUI rule, was to avoid this process. So there you go. If you are a GSA contractor out there and you're interested, let us know what's going on. Have you heard about this? I mean, this is revision 1. They came out with the original version in 2022, apparently. Never heard anything about it. They've updated it for 171 Rev 3. Are they bugging you about it? Is this real? Was there a comment process that we didn't hear about somehow? If you're a defense contractor and you have to do GSA work, are you hearing about this? Are you worried about this? Is this complete news to you? We're sort of learning about this along with everybody else. I was very surprised that the GSA did not take the opportunity to come out and be like, we did it. Because remember, DHS and DoD went at it for years, where they were like, yeah, CMMC is cool, but we're going to do our own thing over here. And we got our own scoring system. And we think these are the priority controls. And it was back and forth, but they made a lot of noise about it. GSA just kind of posted this, and then and that was kind of it. So what do you think? Do you like the examples that are in here? Do you think that DoD should borrow from what they're doing moving into CMMC 3.0? Because we're waiting on that proposed rule to get published. They're going to be looking for public comments. So should they adopt some of the example language out of this document for CMMC guidance? Should they adopt the way that the assessment process runs for CIO-IT security-21-112R1 for CAP 2.0 under CMMC? Do you think that they should have just used CMMC instead of coming up with this process? Do you think that all the agencies are going to come up with their own flavor? Probably the worst possible timeline would be if they all come up with their own.
6 different enclaves. I got my DHS enclave. I got my DoD, my GSA.
You know, the whole idea here was you have a standard baseline so that we can share the data, and that the data is protected the same way. And here they're saying we're going to evaluate every system on a case by case basis. That immediately is going to me, the DoD is going to be like, well, you know, this is the problem the RMF world has, where one authorizing official says, I'm willing to accept X risk. The other authorizing official says, I'm not willing to do that, so I'm not going to have reciprocity between these two systems, even though the entire system was created so that all the AOs would agree. If you decide it's fine, then I trust that it's also fine, and it just didn't really work out. So let us know. Have you heard about it? Did we completely miss the news on this? Is this the first that anybody's talking about it? Let us know, and hopefully we can hear from GSA soon and get some updates, and we'll see you next week.
See y'all.